anybody have any questions on the minutes from the Salem team? Let me ask this question. Does everybody on the Salem team have access to board docs where you can get these documents?
I did not have access to the minutes.
So Tiffany, on Friday the 5th, Jen Kaiser emailed out in the same email as the links is a link to board docs. And that brings you to the page where the minutes are attached to the agenda item B. So I think the motion was made. I think the motion was seconded.
Yep. Okay.
Any other discussion?
No. So East Lyme will vote aye.
Aye.
Well, no, yeah, it's just the chairs of the two boards do the voting. So East Lyme will vote aye, and Sean?
Yeah, Salem will vote aye as well.
Okay, so those minutes are approved. So we'll move on to the discussion action items for the evening. And Sean, you want to take the first one?
Yeah, we'll go to discussion item action letter B, the discussion for the proposed Salem tuition rates for Salem students attending East Lyme High School for 2020 to 2021. Now, I understand there's no change here in what we reviewed earlier this year, correct?
Yeah, no
Right.
change.
So, right, and so for the Salem board, these tuition rates, these are the tuition rates that we've used to put the budget together that went to the Salem Board of Finance. So we should be pretty familiar with these tuition rates. Kim, you're there. Tell me if I'm wrong on any of that.
You're good.
Okay. So does anybody on the Salem side have any questions regarding the tuition rates for the 2021 school year? Okay. Yeah, I would say, and we've not had this discussion. We've barely had this discussion at all at the Salem Board of Ed, Tim. I wasn't sure if anybody on the East Lyme side had a similar discussion. But due to everything that's going on, has there been any discussion on the East Lyme side about any modification to those rates for the 2021 school year due to COVID-19 or any other factor that's gone on since we last met?
No, we have not. None, Jeff?
No, nope. Same.
Okay.
So hopeful. Well, who knows? Who knows what will transpire? I'm sure if we will adapt us accordingly, I'm sure. Okay. Anybody
All right.
from East? Yeah. Anybody from East Lyme have any issues with the proposed tuition rates for the coming year? Or the yeah. No, it's a reconciliation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm on the wrong one.
Yeah. The first one up is for the reconciliation of the 2019-20 tuition, and
Yep. So
and that's where
that was out of order.
Yeah, and that's where we have East Lyme. You folks overpaid by $51,582. Is that right, Kim?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So I was on the wrong agenda topic. So this is agenda A. That's the reconciliation. Again, unless anything's changed, we're pretty familiar with the reconciliation number from the year before as well.
Yeah. Okay. And that, Mariana, is that, or Kim, that's when East Lyme will pay or give a credit back, I guess. Is that done over a period of time?
Yes, that'll get adjusted in next year's invoice over 10 months. So we'll bill and then reduce the amount each month.
Okay. Anybody from East Lyme have any concerns or questions about the reconciliation for 1920?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so in that case, to make it official, could I have a motion to approve the reconciliation rates for the Salem tuition for the 1920 school year?
So moved.
Thanks, Tim.
Anybody can second. Jamie seconded, looks like.
Okay. Motion's made and seconded. Any further discussions? Either board?
Mhm.
All right, what do you say, Tim?
I'll say aye.
All right, Salem votes aye as well.
Okay, great. So I'll do the next one, and that's, again, for discussion, item number B, proposed Salem tuition rates for Salem students attending East Lyme High School for 2021. That's all been laid out as Sean was saying earlier. Basically, you guys have seen this and have baked it into your budget for next year. And I assume, Mariana, that we have done the same thing in terms of revenues for the town. And
Yep,
that's in our budget recommendation. So we're pretty well set on that. Sean, anything from your side?
No, I think on that, yeah, so this, from a timing perspective, these are all the numbers that we baked into the budget. Kim, I know you and Mariana worked a couple rounds to make sure the numbers were right. We baked them in, presented it 1,400 times or so to the Salem Board of Finance, so I think we're good. I may have exaggerated there a bit. Seems that.
Hey,
way.
Sean, this is Sam. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, the sun is coming right through my eyes here. So the only question I have, Tim, in the East Lyme board relative to the tuition for next year is that, obviously we this is all contractually based, right? So we're clear about the tuition costs and the increases, but we are obviously in unprecedented times here where, the experience that we're getting charged for per student is not the same. So
Right.
let's just say in September, the students can't go back in a normal capacity, right, as we would expect, to school, and that lasts for into December or even into the next year, and we're paying this kind of flat rate per student per head. My only question to you is that, I guess the expectation of that contract is that, our students are getting everything that entails them being a student in the East Lyme School District, meaning availability to athletics, availability to extracurricular, all of those pieces that, East Lyme has just a phenomenal reputation for as to why we signed the contract again with you. And so, is there a possibility that if we do not go back in a face-to-face capacity in September, that the board in East Lyme would consider giving us a discount for that for next year?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. And I would imagine it would come out in the reconciliation as our expenses would be shown. I don't know, Mariana, do you have or Jeff?
Yeah, I honestly haven't gotten that far, Sam, and thinking, if maybe it would behoove us if, once we know that, we're not coming back in session, or if we do go out in session, that maybe a meeting gets held, a cooperative meeting gets held, and we have some discussions around that. Because you're right, there's the educational component, because we plan on synchronous learning, moving the curriculum forward, online, learning next year. So, that doesn't change. But you're right, the sports component, field usage, et cetera, that would be different. So
So
that could be
Jeff, for this past what we've just gone through, when we do a reconciliation on 2019-20 budget, there will be some cost reductions that will occur because of the last 3 months, such as Sam was saying, as extracurricular activity and monies that weren't spent on referees and fields and transportation for athletics and so forth, which those are all cost shared, right? I mean,
I think the transportation costs are taken out separately in the way that it's calculated.
yeah. No, I was thinking for sports.
Yeah, because
Go ahead.
we're still
Mariana
paying-
wants to say
Go
something.
ahead, Mariana. Yeah.
You're right on, Tim, that it'll be, it'll come out in the reconciliation. So for example, we didn't have spring sports this year. So when I do the reconciliation for 19-20 this year, obviously we spent less money in high school stipends for sports. So that will reduce the expense. Same thing with, while we back out regular transportation, the high school sports transportation is not backed out because obviously it's open to any student, that's playing a sport, including the Salem students. So obviously we had savings in our spring sports transportation. Again, not much, but all of that would all come into play when we do the reconciliation. So while you might not get a credit for next year, as we do the reconciliation, if there's things that we don't spend, then it would be realized when we reconcile.
Yeah. So let me just so there, and again, fortunately it's a relatively short period of time, but so we have probably accrued just from the last 3 months, we've probably been, Salem is paying more than we're delivering in terms of services. So my guess would be is that when the reconciliation would occur, we would be, refunding back to Salem, more than $51,000 or whatever it'd be. I mean, again, it would be would probably be a positive thing. I think Sam's question goes more along the line of saying, if we get into a situation where we have something, where there's a significant drop in extracurricular activities, sporting events, things like that, which we're not delivering, should we be doing some sort of an on-the-fly reconciliation or something? So that we don't wind up, East Lyme doesn't wind up with you guys having overpaid, and then we're sitting there, and then we have to refund back a fairly large amount of money. So I don't know if I don't think we can solve that here, but I think that that's something that maybe we should ask the superintendents to and the finance folks to think through, just kind of in terms of the worst case scenario. I mean, hopefully it's not going to be like that, but something like that is possible. Jeff,
Yes,
Joe?
Yeah, definitely. I think also probably each board should kind of discuss, get all perspectives from board members, on that. And we have contracts too, next year, thinking more of the academic side, contractual obligations to continue to pay, folks. So that factors in as well. But happy to discuss it, definitely.
Okay, good.
Now on the Salem side, I know what we've been doing is Kim's been segregating aside and identifying and flagging any costs that were incurred that are specifically due to COVID. Right? I'm assuming you guys are doing the same thing, right? For potential reimbursement later.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, now you reference contracts for next year, but aren't all contracts for next year, next academic year, starting on July 1st?
Yes.
So, I mean, we still have, obviously we all want the kids to go back in a normal capacity in September, right? That's everybody's goal, and we're all marching towards that go, that stage. But let's just say that doesn't happen. I do think that, I mean, hopefully, I mean, are we going to get a sense from the governor by, you know, the last week of June, whether or not we think it's going to be possible for them to go back face to face in September? I mean, I can't imagine any later than that, knowing and having to plan to open up a school in the end of August.
One would hope. That's
Because-
a great question.
Because that to me would, you know, you would be able to make, we don't have much control over this, obviously, you know that, but you would be able to make with your administration the decision, if you knew that we weren't going back in September, you could make some contractual decisions. Sorry, these dumb dogs are barking here. You could make some contractual decisions, you know, in an Okay. Did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard contractual decisions.
Well, I'm assuming that you'd be able to make some contractual decisions, because you wouldn't want to sign contracts with folks that, you know, if we weren't going back in a face-to-face capacity, that you weren't able to employ them in a full-time basis, I'm assuming, or sign contracts for refs or any of the athletic fields.
Well, yeah, sports are different. There are two different things there. Yeah, sports is a whole different category. I was talking more about the academic side, teacher contracts, paraprofessionals will probably, if the governor does the same thing, we'll end up paying, you know, everybody just as we did, you know, this for the last 4 months. But you're right, referees, sports, definitely, that's something that, you know, can be further discussed, absolutely, and should not be, you know, necessarily charged because we're not using it.
Okay. Points. Jeff, I think that you and Joe should probably, and the finance folks should probably meet on this particular topic, and just so that you kind of have a conversation about, you know, how you're going to monitor this, and then I think maybe it was Sean, suggested that maybe we should bring that information be brought back to both boards separately and shared and discussed as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Jeff and I can reach out to Mariana and Kim and schedule a meeting.
Yeah. Okay, good. Any other comments on the setting the tuition rate for this coming year? Anybody from East Lyme have any concerns? Okay.
I don't.
What?
I
Oh, I'm
s-
sorry.
I don't. This is Candace.
Thanks, Candace. Okay, so would anybody like to make a motion on this, on the proposed Salem tuition rates for Salem students attending East Lyme Public Schools in the year 2020, 2021 as presented?
So moved. Tiff.
Stephanie moves it. Anybody like to second it?
Second.
Jen seconds it. Okay. And any further discussion on this item? Sean, what do you vote?
Ellen votes aye.
Okay, and we vote aye, and I thank Sam for bringing up that very good point. So.
All right, great. So we'll move on to discussion action item C. This is the Appendix C of the co-op agreement. This is one of the principal things that we did want to make sure we voted on when we met earlier this year, where Salem didn't have a quorum. And Joe, what I'm going to ask you to do is maybe help me out walking through this, but just for the remembrance of the Salem board, one of the reasons why this was amended had to do with, I guess, the questions and where it wasn't clear in the co-op agreement about how the co-op agreement structured the invoicing for certain special education type outplacement stuff. And I think this was last year where we went back and we had to seek supplemental appropriations from the town to be able to cover this. One of the things that we took away from it was to coordinate with East Lyme and get language in there that clarified some of those areas. And Joe, if you'd pick up from there and just go into a little bit of detail on that.
Sorry, I was opening up my board docs file for that. In general, what we discovered, and we had a couple of meetings with Kim and Donna and Mariana and Kim and Salem and myself and Jeff, was that there were situations that were no longer applicable when we originally designed the revision. And so we cleared up the kinds of situations that had changed in the last few years in terms of programming. Kim Davis had pointed out that like one of the programs was no longer in existence. And what we did was we created a situation where Salem would pay sort of as you go through the year and remove some of the items that normally had been put into reconciliation. And that's what caused us last year to owe money. But moving forward, we felt it was a more accurate accounting for our usage of certain kinds of services from East Lyme. I was pulling up my thing, but anyway, Kim Davis, Kim Gattery, maybe Mariana. Without looking at the document, I can't remember some of the specifics that we changed, but we really delineated what programs we would be paying for along the way, what services. Kim?
Yep, certainly. Yep, I was trying to just adjust my screen so I could see them both at the same time. But, you know, it just cleaned up a few things in the past when a student had needed, a Salem student had needed a contracted service, for example, following by a school audiologist, if you will, and FM equipment in the classroom so that the audio was supported in the environment for a student with maybe a hearing impairment. The contract came to East Lyme. East Lyme paid the bill, then created a, you know, an end of the year statement for Salem with all those invoices, you know, as backup, of course. And one of the things we changed was that those contracts would now just go directly to Salem instead of having East Lyme as a middleman. So you would have that on a monthly basis, and it could be more accurately reflected in your budget picture each time you met, if that's how you do things financially. And then specific around paraprofessionals who are hired individually for a particular student, because that's directly dependent, you know, the hiring of that staff member is directly dependent on the attendance of that student in the building, so that if the student moved away, the position would also go away. And when a student comes in with that need in their IEP, then it's also fulfilled. So that was more clearly delineated. I think those were two of the biggest changes. I'll just toggle back. You know, we did, as Joe said, update sort of the language to reflect what we call the specialty programs that serve the more intensive students with special education needs, students on the autism spectrum who are not necessarily in a self-contained program, but do receive a significantly modified curriculum with additional services built into their program delivery. We also delineated what is not additional services, what's covered in the special education service rate. So I think that's kind of a quick overview, I guess, unless anybody has any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I'm looking at it, and maybe it's the formatting on my screen, but speech language pathology and occupational therapy they're split oddly. I'm a little touchy about it because in the Medicare law, they're left out a comma, which makes us lose money. So if that could be reformatted to read clearer.
Oh, I see. Occupational therapy. There should be a return, so it goes down on the next line. Certainly. I think, I don't know, Jackie, if you have this as a Word document to draft that change, would that be appropriate, Jeff?
Yeah, definitely. We can
Okay.
fix the word too. Yeah, we can fix
Okay.
that. Yeah. Yeah,
that's a good catch, Jen. I think for me, being being clear and crisp about some of the specific things that we're calling out as far as the specialized programs is important. But the other key thing I think here for Salem is definitely talking about the periodicity or the timing of when the invoices come. So getting there monthly, I think that was probably key for us.
Yeah, I think that made a big difference. And honestly, it's, you know, it's a less logistics, you know, for us as well. So it's a win-win on both sides. Yeah.
Right. Oops, what did I do? Okay. All right. So with that said, does anybody want to offer up a motion to approve the language in Appendix C of the cooperative agreement with the modification in Section 1 for speech language therapy and occupational therapy to be reformatted to be on one line?
Jamie from East Lyme does. I'll make a first.
Thank you, Jamie. Second.
I see Barry
Barry, I
Sheckley's.
see your hand. You're just on mute. Thanks. Okay. Any further discussion?
Sean, I have one question. I think that this is an obvious question, but I think it should be said. There's a lot of services that are no longer covered under our special ed cost. So I just want to make sure that if there's an East Lyme student who needs any of these other services, that's also taken out before we reconcile. I just felt like it needed to be said. It seemed obvious to me, but we never talked about it.
I can comment to say yes, that it absolutely would be taken out. You wouldn't pay for any of our, you know, our students' special services.
Good. Okay, good. Good question, Jen. Any other question or comment? Either board.
Okay.
All right, Tim, what do you think?
So yeah, so I guess we'll vote aye on this one.
Yep, and same on Salem, we'll vote aye as well.
All right, so we'll move on to item number D, which is an update on the East Lyme Public Schools Superintendent proposed budget for the coming year. Jeff, you got some things you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I'll give a quick update with the onset of COVID. I think back in January when we reported out, we were sitting at a 4.98% Board of Ed approved budget increase. Since that time, in working with the town and the Board of Finance, we cut $826,000 out of next year's budget, dropping that percentage down to an approved 3.3%. The Board of Finance, we worked closely with them. The Board of Ed had about 6 additional meetings. Our FFO, our Finance, Facilities and Operations Committee, subcommittee of the board, had 5 meetings. And we worked through that process during the month of March and April, and then through the beginning of May as well. So we did add technology dollars in though, and had a lot of discussions with the Board of Finance to move us to a one-to-one district. So we'll be purchasing laptops, 2-in-1 devices for almost all of our students. And our primary kids will be getting some iPads. So we're excited about that opportunity. We're doing that through the town acquisition plan, and we are already in the process that will be finalized this week with the Board of Finance through our capital improvement plan, and we'll be able to put in that order and hopefully have those devices by the start of next year. So every high school student will be receiving a device at hopefully the very beginning of next year, if not, a couple weeks into the school year. A lot of districts are purchasing devices, that's for sure. So we're hoping trying to get those as quick as we can. Let's see. We are also giving back some money to the town. We had $263,000 left over that we estimated for the end of the year. Tonight, previously at our Board of Ed meeting, we're adding some additional money to that as we continue to work through closing out, POs and the end of the year. So looking at somewhere, between $300,000 and $350,000 that we'll be giving back, to the town by the end of the year. That's still, we're still finalizing on that final number. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell. The 3.3% increase is where we're at. Devices for all students, which is very exciting for us all and for our students and our staff as we prepare for synchronous learning next year if we are working remote.
And Jeff, is that technology that's built into the Board of Ed budget, or is that through a capital fund separate from the Board of Ed's budget?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, just to clarify, yeah, it's part of a 5-year plan. So we are making a bulk purchase now, and we're paying it back through the Board of Ed budget over the course of 5 years through the operating budget. So, Marianne, the total was about, what did it come out? About 250,000 a year. I think we are paying for the devices about $1.3 million, Sean, in device purchases.
Oh, so the town is bonding it or so, right? And then you're repaying that over 5 years right out of the, okay.
Exactly. Gotcha. Yep. So that's where we land. A lot of work with the Board of Finance and the town. So
Yeah.
What were some of the bigger hitters that made up that 800 or so K that you took out of your original budget submittal?
So we had, part of the 4.98, we had added a number of different staff working with the Board of Ed and through our budget workshops. We had added, 2 math coaches. We had added some extra teachers down at the primary grades, 2 kindergarten teachers, 2 first grade teachers, a social worker, so 1 or 2 other that were in there too. We basically cut all of that out. We did keep a BCBA, a board certified behavioral analyst, and we did keep in a technology manager for the district because we're putting all these devices in play. We really need the support behind that to, be supporting our staff and our teachers. So we left those 2 got left in.
So those positions in the elementary, those additional teachers, the recommendation to add those, was that based on class size analysis or?
Exactly. We've got some pretty high kindergarten numbers right now, sitting 20, 21, 22. We were trying to lessen that going into next year at the first grade level, this kindergarten group going up to first grade. So that was the intended plan. And then also, we weren't sure what our kindergarten numbers coming in were going to be like. So we were trying to add another kindergarten teacher or 2 kindergarten teachers to help offset that. Still, not everybody has registered, but our kindergarten numbers, we're still working through that, but we took out those positions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, when you guys went through the evolution with your Board of Finance, I know in Salem, and I'm sure it's happened in East Lyme too, but the normal process for how a budget got adopted was clearly different this year. How much of East Lyme got to weigh in to, provide comments on any of the cuts that were being made or any of the proposals that weren't going forward? Was there a lot of commenting done through that process that you guys had, or?
Well, typically we'd have a referendum that would have happened, at the end of May, and that did not occur. So the Board of Finance basically held a series of Zoom, meetings and did allow for public comment. They did have a running log on their website for allow the community to respond and share information about, their thoughts on the budget, concerns, questions. We received about 19 to 20 questions from the Board of Finance that we responded back to them on, our budget items. And I kind of asked the Board of Ed too. I don't know if you all thought that, the community had an opportunity to kind of weigh in. I mean, I thought they did. During the public session and hearing, there's a couple folks that did chime in from the community, but it was not an overwhelming response. And the mill rate is increasing 0.17. So it's a pretty small mill rate increase, which is good, which is very good. And so I don't know if that helped in not having as many people, come out and force to mill rate down.
I wouldn't mind adding, if you don't mind, Jeff, just because I followed the process, because it is very challenging on Zoom. Having the participation level, and because of just the challenges that we and the Board of Finance were facing, I think that they did a very, very good job. I really do. Last year we were challenged in different areas. It's usually historically been quite challenging, as Salem, I would imagine, feels possibly the same way. Each year it's very challenging. But I do think that the Board of Finance this year went above and beyond by setting up different links. They did utilize social media that I did see to prompt people. I really liked the website where people could go and make commentary. Because yes, even though there is that one evening where people can come out, usually from what I can recall, there aren't many people that come out. Last year, we did have quite a few people attend. I want to say it was over 500 or 600, and that was really because there was going to be a substantial cut to our budget. I want to say it was around $500,000. So that clearly brought people out. This year, it was different, but there still was, a good amount, 30 to 40, I want to say, commentary, at least on the email. Not the email, the website. And there was a lot of people tuning in during the deliberations. So I think that it went fairly good.
Good, thanks, Candace.
Any other questions at all?
I just had, this is sort of a follow-up to what Sean asked, but just specifically for the high school. Were there any cuts that would change the programs at the high school as we know it this year? And
No, we had, we were trying to add a social worker at the high school. So it was an ad though. So the ad got cut. So we didn't reduce.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also the one big thing is that we're basically going to have all of the technology servers or the service for the Wi-Fi in the high school completely fixed, so that every place in the high school can handle as many laptops and iPhones as you can throw at it, and that should be done before the school year starts, right, Amy? So that's actually an add-on to our infrastructure, which was desperately needed. Okay. Any other questions for Jeff? Want to move on to the next one?
Yeah. So Jeff, thanks for that. Joe, you want to give a rundown on the Salem side?
I'll begin. I'll ask Kim to fill in a couple specific numbers, or you, Sean. Our situation was different in that we've had about 4 years of either minus budgets, zero budgets, or this present school year a modest increase. So when we put a budget together, it was very high by our standards for sure. I seem to remember was something like that I presented approximately an 8.33% budget to the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed added technology, I believe, which brought it up to actually 9.66. Kim, does that sound about right? Or Sean? When it went over to the Board of Finance, I believe it was like roughly 9.66 initially.
Yeah. So your budget, the superintendent's budget presented to the Board of Ed, did get modified by the Board of Ed by adding in a significant amount of technology. I think added in additional teachers and made some modifications to I think our budgeting assumptions for a couple line items. Right?
Correct. So we had significant tuition increases, special education increases. we put, I think it was, we had put in approximately, the board added approximately 100,000, 106,000 in technology. So together it was, you know, a very, very robust budget. But in fairness to the process, I think the Board of Finance understood where the cost drivings were coming from. We, with Sean and a budget subcommittee, put together a very, very detailed explanations to the Board of Finance, a formal presentation, which detailed that. Along the way, you know, things change. Insurance rates are more exact, et cetera. So we, through some of our natural reductions and some of the discussion with Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance with the first selectman suggested we remove the technology, and that would be paid for with the town funds. They recognized the need for the technology, but said, let's take it out of the budget. So that happened. We also, Jeff, we've had a much lower enrollment at this point in terms of kindergarten. So we had put in the budget for 2 new teachers, a first grade teacher and a 4th grade teacher, because this past school year we had asked for an additional 3rd grade teacher and we were unable to fund that. So we put those in, and then I spoke with our administrative staff, and we voluntarily removed one of the kindergarten teachers because we didn't have the numbers to support it. We were still in the 30s and remained there to this night. So we felt we could begin the school year with 2 kindergarten teachers instead of 3. The present kindergarten section, the 3rd teacher would go to 1st grade because there is a large number moving forward, but our net FTE would be +1, not +2. So that remained in the budget. Then of course, COVID came into play, and there was a lot of discussion that the town would not be able to bear a mill rate increase, but the town recognized the Board of Ed still needed a serious amount of funding to meet its tuition demands, et cetera. So with a creative balance of some funds that the town had, they were able to justify paying some of the tuition money in the Board of Ed budget for East Lyme, actually, because the numbers were higher next year, as a sort of one-time expense. So ultimately, to accomplish a no mill rate increase budget with some town funding, the Board of Ed budget is 5.28% over last year. And Kim, I'm taking that off the document that you worked on that Jennifer released today. So our Board of Ed budget increase is 5.28%. Questions for Kim or Sean or me?
Yeah, and just to add to that, so so yeah, even with that 5.2 and change % increase on the Board of Ed side, the mill rate in Salem, they were able to do some other things in the Board of Finance, so they kept the mill rate increase at 0 for next year. So they were pretty comfortable with that.
Very good. Wow. Okay. We move on to the next item. So this is an update on the Salem food services. Jeff, is there anything you wanted to?
Not necessarily. No, we more recently, I guess I know Chris Urban has been working just as he has in East Lyme with food disbursement to folks in town, families that require it and need it. It's open to anybody. I know that many families have utilized that service, and it's gone smoothly. Chris was just selected to be on a state board committee regarding reopening and food service programs, looking at next year. So that'll give us some good insight, hopefully, pertaining to program, how the programs will operate potentially for going into next year. Joe, any insight on your end? I mean, I think things were going very well, and we talked about it in January. We need to come together, obviously, and just talk still about next year's agreement. But we really hope we keep the partnership going. It's been very positive.
Very positive from Salem's end. Parents have spoken very highly of the offerings and the service delivery. We enjoy working with Chris. He's a man of passion and creativity. He has certainly taken this, Salem under his wing and given it all he has. So Jeff and I have spoken a number of times about how pleased we are, how positive our parents and staff have been. We're just at the beginning of a discussion about next year's finances in Salem, and then with Salem and East Lyme. So Kim threw out a date last week for Chris to prepare a budget for us and sit down with us folks, and then we'll sit with Jeff and sort of hammer that out. But it was a nice compliment that Chris was selected to be on this reopening committee. Because I think he's a very creative, passionate food service professional, but also very practical. And I think he'll be a good voice at that table because we're getting all kinds of suggestions about how to reopen school and run it. And until we get the official guidance, we really don't know. But no, we're incredibly pleased, Tim, and we thank the East Lyme Board of Ed for the partnership in this food service venture. It's been very, very successful.
Good. Any other questions on this? Okay, move on.
Okay, I guess this one's my turn. We're up to G. So, fall 2020 opening plans. And whatever you say tonight is written in stone. You can't change it.
We'll open on time. No worries. We're, as Sam had mentioned earlier, we're still waiting for that guidance. Hopefully, maybe it will be out this week. Joe, we heard I think 2 weeks ago or so that it was, something was supposed to be forthcoming. Last week we didn't see it, so hopefully this week, we will see some reopening guidelines. Probably be something similar, to the ESY guidelines that we did receive and are working through for summer school. But we in East Lyme, we formed because of a task force, a committee, and we've broken up into 5 categories, the reopening process. And each of those categories is going to have subcommittees underneath them. So we're about to push that whole set of information out to the district to try and see, which staff members would like to be part of some of these subcommittees under our 5 core areas that we're looking at. That's, basically instruction, blended learning model, going back and forth between your remote learning and being in-house, operations, schedules, budgetary items, logistics, communication. So we've got 5 core areas that we're working through, and it's going to be a very interesting summer, to say the least. And I'll leave it at that. And I know, Joe, we've had a lot of regional discussions and meetings on this as well, and I'm sure you're working through the same process.
Jeff and I are participating in a regional thought partnership with Learn. It's a group of superintendents who have agreed to meet weekly and go through each component of reopening and see what we can rely on the rest to create for us, and then bring back to district what will be district homegrown as we await state guidance. Fran Rabinowitz participates in our weekly superintendent Learn meetings. She's the executive director of CAPS, and they're still undecided as to whether the rollout plan will be a state rollout where all schools will fall under the same umbrella and we'll just tweak it for our individual LEA, or it will be a regional rollout where all the schools within a region will fall under the same umbrella and again tweak it. So that's pretty significant when you think about every component related to reopening. So Jeff and I see each other at least twice a week at Learn meetings via Zoom. And we've talked in the administrative level and the office level in Salem about the different components that Jeff referred to. We haven't named committees yet because we're waiting a little bit more for guidance on some key issues like that ombudsperson, right, Jeff? You know, the controversial who's going to be the liaison, the COVID liaison, which carries a lot of responsibility with it. So, but we have, you know, I have many pieces of paper with ideas like other folks in our district do about how to bring the folks together that we need. And as Jeff said, this summer will be an incredibly working summer as we attempt to figure out what's going to happen. One of the complications, and you're probably aware of this, both boards, is that within the rest of Learn, we've counted a minimum of 5 public health agencies, which creates a very interesting dynamic because we ultimately have to go to our public health director for clearance on activities and graduations, et cetera, et cetera. And we work with 5 different folks.
So we Lyme, you guys are in the Wedge Light Health District, right?
We are.
And we're in the Uncas Health District.
Okay.
If there's a discrepancy between the recommended guidance between those 2 health districts, what is the go forward plan between Salem and East Lyme to reconcile that, if that were to pop up?
Well, I think one of the components is we've talked regionally about we've got to get these people all on the same page and you know, having the same discussions, because that can't happen. We can't have one health district saying one thing and one saying another. And I know they're very frustrated because they are, you know, the governor and the state is you know, pushing things out and saying, you know, like graduation, for instance, you know, health department has to, you know, approve your graduation plan, you know, as an example. Well, in the health department, when we call up, you know, our director, he's basically saying, you know, I don't have the authority to do that. I've been just given the authority, but I'll give you my recommendations on what's safe and what you should be doing. So they're struggling because they're not getting a lot of information from the state, and they're kind of being told, you know, they're going to do this and going to do that, but the communication is struggling. So Joe, I don't know if you're hearing from Uncas. You know, I work with Steve Mansfield, the director, and, you know, Ledge Light.
I deal with Patrick McCormick, and he's been great to deal with, and he's very honest about those kinds of issues and recognizes our, even though we're a relatively small RESC, there are 5 of them that are responsible for guiding. And I think at some point, I'm going to guess through our thought partnership, we probably will have to have a meeting with all of them together.
Yeah.
To get, you know, to really get clarification, especially if reopening is regionally directed and not state directed.
Wow. Yeah. Say, Jeff and Joe, have either you guys sat back and started to calculate the cost of reopening in terms of the additional gear and stuff that you need to support the staff and the children coming back into the schools? And I heard some pretty wild numbers about how many masks are going to be needed, for example.
Yeah, Joe, I don't know if you want to go first, or I'm happy to go first.
I was going to say, Kim Gattery one day threw a number at us of $288,000 for 2 masks a day for each student. And was that staff also, or just students, Kim? You're muted.
Yes, that was just students.
So that's 288,000. Fran Rabinowitz, Tim, has maintained without money, this whole reopening thing with those guidelines is a non-starter. But I don't have to tell you, executive orders can happen with some ink and no money.
Yeah, but that's but I've heard that, and I've also heard that the larger districts like New Haven, for example, have sat back and done calculations, and it's just, they say there's no way that it can happen. I mean, in terms of without money.
Without money, right.
Yeah, and that's been the position of CAPS, that we need to have money in order to do this, and that's been the message that's been sent to the commissioner to give to the governor, that we can't do this. I mean, having a bus, every bus is going to have a bus monitor, that's monitoring, the 20 kids that can ride. Our first student can't accommodate the number of buses that we would need. They could give us maybe 2 or 3 extras, or four buses as extra, but that's it. They don't have the drivers, and they don't have the enough vehicles. So that out of the gate is the biggest problematic component, getting kids to and from school. So, and not to mention, like I said, all the PPE equipment that's going to be required and needed.
Now, Jeff.
So, I mean, at some point, Joe and Jeff, this obviously is your profession that you're overseeing here, and at some point, I mean, I'm sure there's other of us on the call that are thinking this, but at some point, the risk benefit ratio starts to change, right? Where we've seen the COVID cases go down substantially. From a health and medical perspective, the masks by September, I mean, aren't really preventing a whole lot, to be honest with you. I mean, we're not working in nursing homes, and they're in schools. So, and we haven't seen historically, right, as the disease has kind of progressed, the virus has not affected, for the most part, the population that we're dealing with here. So at some point, somebody has to say, we just need to go back to normal as best we can, right? Maybe without masks, maybe for the health and well-being of the community and for the children and for education purposes, we need to try that. And then if things start to go the wrong direction, then we have a plan. But I think we're in risk adverse because of the lawsuits that happen and all of that. But we're in a dire situation with money as it is in most of our communities around the state. This is only adding financial burden with, I'm not quite sure, a significant upgain in terms of reducing risk. And I hope that we're pushing the envelope in that direction, because you're right. As Fran said, you cannot open the school systems in Connecticut with the expectation that the towns and schools are going to buy masks for every student. The towns can't afford that. So either the option is we should know that now and know that we have to go to virtual learning because that's not possible, and then let the community weigh in and say, look, virtual learning is not cutting it for our students. We're not there yet to be able to do this, and we are putting ourselves backwards so much further as a society and community by just not addressing these risks that we can. I mean, I can have people go back to work. We can have people go to malls, and all the other things, but why can't they go back to school? I mean, I don't understand.
Candace, you have your hand up, I see.
I do. So some really good, valid points being made. Here's a suggestion. Why don't we get together as 2 boards and we'll send a letter to the state of Connecticut stating some of the things and some of the concerns that you have, in addition to the concerns that we have.
I love it. Good idea.
I think that's a great idea, right? So
yeah.
Can we do that? I'm all for signing it.
All right.
Sean? I'll sign it twice.
Add it to the pile.
I mean, listen, yeah, you're saying all these things that the majority of us agree with, but none of us can change. So really, the person that we need to speak to are a governing body that governs us. Correct. So I'm all for that collaborative.
Let's make it happen.
Jeff and Joe, are you willing to put something together?
I won't speak for Jeff. Jeff and I, at last Thursday's meeting, the superintendents gave Fran a vote of confidence to take back to the reopening committee, that's the avenue she works in, that the LEARN superintendents completely and unanimously supported all students returning in the fall. She said she would bring that back. I believe there was one other rest that had expressed the same sentiment. So through Fran, we've at least said let's get everybody back to school. We didn't address the financial piece. But if you want Jeff and I to attempt to put together a letter on behalf of the boards and have the board chair start by doing their edits, Jeff, are you all up for that?
Yeah, absolutely. We get full support, through CAPS and their position. They basically stated the same thing. So, sure. I mean,
we did support the return to school without a doubt.
Yeah.
We know we have to figure, we have to do that. There are, as you said, Sam, one of the biggest blocks, and we need Shipman and we need Pullman and we need a couple of the other Board of Ed attorneys behind us to help with the potential liability issues. Because without a strong framework, even though Board of Ed employees are protected if they act in good faith and they follow protocol, we need public health support around protocol. Without that, we're just going to be potentially inviting some issues. I've heard discussions as granular as should Board of Eds pay parents to transport their children. That sounds simple, but it's besides the monetary piece, there's a potential liability piece, because I've been down that road when I was a special ed director, that if you paid someone to do that and they got into a car accident, they were actually, acting as an extension of your transportation system. And so there's so many aspects to each one of these pieces that have to be solved in a legal form. Otherwise, our boards, you and us are going to be exposed. This is uncharted territory. I mean, we have seen, I'm sure, Kelly Davis, you've seen the Andy Feinsteins. They have been out. There are attorneys already waiting to attack us for not acting the way they thought we should have acted. So I'm very sensitive about the liability piece. But Jeff and I can do some work.
Well, yeah, I just think that, obviously lobbyists can significantly change the trajectory of how things are going in the future. And I think that all of us being advocates for high quality, meaningful education, and that we care, that's why we're here volunteering our time, that we collectively, working underneath, with you and Joe and Jeff, and there's so many other boards out there in the state that are doing the same thing. We need to join forces here and make our voices heard, that what we need, because I mean, I respect that, the superintendents are doing that collectively, but there's a lot more power in numbers. And if we do that as my board and East Lyme member, I lost her name on the screen now, but as she suggested, Candace, I just think that it's very powerful, right? If we can get all the boards from every town behind this initiative, because this is our community, this is our kids, and what's going on now is not working.
Well, Jeff and I can look at Cabe, perhaps. Cabe may already have some stuff framed, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
So we'll check on that for you
So
all.
it needs to be thoughtful, because there are kids who are immunocompromised and they need to have a plan too.
Right, but there's always an option for, right now we have homeschool option, right, for folks.
But that involves a parent, so no, it has to be thoughtful.
Yeah. So let's. I think it's worth taking a shot at it, and then having both boards review the letter, have the conversations, and then see if we can have something that can be can go out. I think that's the right thing to be doing. It's good.
Hey Tim, based on everything that we know, I know we both boards approved next year's calendars already. Have you guys put any thought to based on how this unfolds, having to revisit some of those, the way the calendar falls and what we're doing?
The board hasn't discussed it. I have had brief conversations with Jeff about it, but yes, I mean, you're right. You just don't know. I mean, there's a million different possibilities right now. I'm absolutely thinking, if waiting to see what happens across the country following the past 2 weeks and see what transpires. So that could throw a monkey wrench into everything in one way, or it could vault us in another direction. you just don't know. So, but that's another good point.
Yeah, I mean, after tonight, I think we've got 2 regularly scheduled board meetings between now and when school starts, right? And when were what was the expectation for when we were supposed to get some type of guidance from the state about whether this is going to be state as a whole or regional, and what the guidelines, what was the expected projection of when they're going to have something in the works on that?
This week we were hoping.
Right. We were told by the 15th, it was sort of the drop dead date, but it was supposed to be sooner than later. But it's so complicated. I'm imagining that the commissioner had to turn his recommendation in the end of May, maybe the last day of May. And then it goes to the OPM, the Office of Policy Management, legal folks, gets kicked around, gets to the governor's office. So I'm sure that's where it's right now.
Yeah.
And like Tim said, the virus, the epidemiologist keeps saying the virus is going to tell us what we can do. It was not a particularly good weekend for the virus worldwide. The World Health Organization said Sunday was the highest spike ever with COVID in the world. Now, I know that people at the State Department are watching schools that reopen in other parts of the world, but we're opening in stages in Connecticut, so that's going to give us some data pretty quickly.
Tiffany, did you have something?
Yeah, on that note, Joe and Jeff, have you heard anything about the schools that have opened in other parts of the country? Are there studies coming out about what they've done and how successful it's been?
Not through other parts of the country, because I don't think they've.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
The world. The world. I've read a little bit. I know one country had to backtrack and reclosed.
Yeah, there was in Israel. There were several countries that have reopened their schools, and they are since May 1st, I think it was, and remarkably, they're doing very well, and it appears that the children from kindergarten through age 12 seem to be, as I think Sam mentioned or something, doing quite well. The question is do they become carriers or people that have children pass it on back, and then it comes back into the whole health hygiene component. So. But there is some data out there in European countries that are doing quite well, and when you look at the data in terms of Hong Kong, it's pretty remarkable too. So it's kind of crazy,
Yeah, Finland apparently has had some really good success with reopening, and they're still seeing a slowing despite reopening their schools. But for sure, I believe Japan had attempted to reopen and then had to go back. They couldn't. But I don't think it had to do with schools in general. I think it was a bigger ecosystem. And the WHO did literally just came out with a report saying that through contact tracing, they're not sure that they don't believe that asymptomatic patients with COVID are not spreading it the way they once thought. But that doesn't mean if you say are pre-symptomatic that you're not spreading it. It's really the truly asymptomatic, which, we know we don't necessarily know. So an improvement at least.
Yeah, I think the whole logic, Jen, the data is changing every day, right? So initially they thought that the contact, right, was a big deal in the whole COVID virus,
right.
But it's not as much on surfaces and all of that. So
right,
we learn more every day, but
right, and they're finding the only thing to consider though is that school systems in general were, one of the things they are seeing right now is the filtration systems and the air systems. And so being inside, being in close quarters, that is increasing a lot of risks. And when we are seeing increase, it's not people going outside. It's not, some of those better ventilated. And we know that some of our schools are a little bit older that maybe need some updates to those types of systems. So those might be things that we need to keep in mind too, but there are just so many
So
different things.
could I just add in really quick from an instructional point of view? So I just want to be really clear. We are not waiting for the instructional planning though. I want to be really clear about that. So our association president, Scott Mahon, Kim Davis, and myself are chairing the instructional subcommittee. And our hope is that that letter will go out tomorrow and Salem will receive the letter to have reps as part of our instructional work. I'm planning on starting that committee the week of June 22nd, and I'm planning to be done with our instructional plan by July 17th. And part of that is because our hope is to create an adaptable plan. We really see it as 3 pathways. We see it as, if you think about it as, we think about brick to click. So they're in the building most of the time, but then they're also home. Click to brick, they're home, but then the part of it's in the building, and then just click. And we want to build 3 pathways. So at any moment, if the East Lyme community has to activate any pathway or go down it, we have gotten together with all of our teachers and practitioners, and we've developed that. We've developed the protocols for that. We've developed what that looks like so that we are able to be adaptable and also provide quality instruction that we feel meets the needs of our students in a way that we would as if they were in brick, right? As if they were in our building, and how can we emulate that as much as possible? So I just wanted to be clear from an instructional point of view, that is not something we are waiting for guidance on. We are gonna move with that. Now the logistics of it, how much time, what that looks like, I mean, that's definitely the after, but we are committing to some serious ways of being instructionally sooner than later, just so that you have that.
Basically, the same thing goes for the social and emotional component too. Kim and I we're chairing that one, and that's huge next year because kids have been out for 6 months, of school. I mean, just take COVID out of the picture. Trying to return kids after that long of being out is going to be hard enough. And then the fears associated with COVID. So we're ramping that up with our district committee. And we want to have a couple meetings, 1 or 2 meetings at least before the end of the school year, hopefully, or around that last week of June.
Well, Amy, to your point earlier as well, am I on mute? No. To your point earlier, I mean, I think that the hard part too, and this isn't always our concern as a Board of Ed, but, in order for the economy to open back up and for our parents and caregivers to go back to work, right? They need to know, especially from pre-K through maybe 6th grade or something, that their kids are going to school, right? And not having to stay at home. So a lot of parents and community members can't go back to work unless there is some kind of schooling, whether it be a daycare or something, or public school. And so, there is a very symbiotic relationship between schools being open and the economy and parents being able to go back to work. And so, this is bigger than us as boards of ed and school system. This is the state and all of that making the decision, because you really can't have one without the other.
Good.
As a parent living that, yes.
Yeah, all of us.
So slightly going off topic. So this is a discussion about how we're getting back to school. So East Lyme, how far are you guys down the path of locking in how graduation is going to go? Or you guys, I mean, you got to be pretty far down that path over here.
Yeah, we had finalized tonight one additional plan. That's a drive-in movie style theater type setting. We're working with the senior grad committee and student senate, the Senate program, or Senate student senate, and that's locked in. We're not changing our plans. Most across the region are sticking with the plans that they had going into this. I know that 150 rule came out, but most are not changing and sticking with what their original plans were, and that's what we're doing.
Got it.
Okay, you ready to move on? Last agenda topic, which is future agenda items. Does anyone have any future agenda topics?
COVID-19.
Yeah, COVID-19, yeah. I was thinking that we should probably, because East Lyme is making this big pivot toward blended learning with one-to-one devices, and that Salem has been probably ahead of us with one-to-one devices as well. It would be good to make sure that the incoming freshman class is not necessarily this year, because it's such a weird time, but in the future, because the curriculum is changing, to make sure that the 8th graders that are the 9th graders that are coming in from Salem and the 9th graders that are coming in from East Lyme to make the freshman class are, pretty much in a compatible state in terms of the technology, and how it's used and the processes, or at least I'll make sure that there's a conversation that says that that we're dealing or we're addressing that. So that would be that would be a future agenda topic I'd like to see. And I'm pretty sure it'll be a pretty positive one, but I think we have that obligation.
Tim, pre-COVID, in previous years, I would say about 3 years ago, we began a regular course of meetings with the high school instructional technology staff and our technology folks, so that we could introduce students to software that was being used in East Lyme that was not being used in Salem. So we have, that has been a part of our practice. But I do think I was very excited to hear that Amy is going to invite us to be part of the discussion.
There you go.
Because some board members and I have spoken a number of times that we all had to make the rest of this school year work on the fly. Yes. We not only built the airplane while flying, we were building the parts and changing the building of the parts and all of that while flying. But now we have a chance to really improve education in ways that require some thoughtful preparation. So we are committed to refining how we do distance learning. And we know that some students actually benefit from this style of learning. And we know we're going to do some hybrid work. So I'm excited to work with Amy to be able to be ready for the fall. And then we could report back to the boards in the co-op.
Good. Excellent.
Thanks.
So
Amy.
Tim and Amy, the one group that I'm particularly worried about the most right now are the 8th graders moving into 9th grade, because the expectation and level of work just amplifies, right? As we all know, when you move from middle school to high school. So I think, that with the social and emotional piece that Jeff mentioned, right? All of those pieces and the COVID-19 situation being what it is, I think that's a group that we're going to have to really stay close with and watch and kind of guide a little bit closer than we normally would. So I'm not sure what that looks like, but I do think that as boards, we need to just be aware of that.
Good point, Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else have any future agenda topics? Anything should be raised or next?
So and this is Tamara from Salem. I'm just curious, and I don't know if this is the place for it or not, but it'd be interesting talking about sort of, Amy, what you were talking about, what the grading policy will end up being, particularly for high school kids, because you've got seniors that are going to college who now have a whole semester of passes, and different states are doing it differently. Different schools within Connecticut are doing it differently. So it'd be, I don't know if that's something folks have already talked about or ironed out, but that'd be interesting to hear more about how the high school kids will continue to, particularly the high school kids, because they have, they have college that they have to think about.
Yeah, grading is one of the topics that the subcommittee will be working on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
So Tim, we're talking about the topics for future agenda, populating that. When is the tentative date for the next co-op meeting? Do you know what that is?
I do. I'd have to look up our calendar. It'll take me a second. You remember the calendar we just approved? I think that was on there, Sean.
Yeah, I don't remember. I'm just
January, February. I think.
Normally that would be January.
Yeah, January and May.
Yeah.
Is there, so I'll just put out a broad question to both boards. Do you think there's value in, maybe because of the extraneous circumstances we're in, is there value maybe in having a co-op meeting in advance of that?
Yeah, that's a great idea, especially it's probably you probably would want to see something. No, I don't know, in the earliest fall, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'd almost leave it to the superintendents to when should this group come together to hear something in terms of planning and everything.
Because I'm thinking if we're thinking of trying to figure out what the topic should be, if the meeting's not going to be till January, I'll probably think, at that time, I'm sure we'll probably be, neck deep in budget development as usual. But there's going to be a heck of a lot of other stuff going on. We both know that there's probably going to be a lot of stuff that's going to happen over the summer. Both districts are going to, roll into the fall, into the 2021 school year in one way, shape, form, or another. I'm thinking maybe September. Just get us both back together, figure out what transpired over the summer. How are we executing the start of the year? And where does that leave us? I'm thinking it's probably, one of the better times to maybe just recheck in with each other.
Hey, what might behoove us is, kind of look at the next 2 weeks here and see what we do get for guidance. And then maybe it's a question of Joe, myself, Tim and Sean, maybe we communicate and say, okay, let's set this, and then we can reach back out to our respective boards. But I think if you're going to do it, like you're saying, Sean, September is probably the best time frame, Yeah. It gives a little.
Yeah, I guess then, Jeff, why don't we leave it to you and Joe to maybe come up with a recommendation back to the boards of when an intermediate time we might be able to meet in advance of the January meeting.
Sure.
Yep. Good. Really good point. Okay. Everybody all set? I'm going to move on to our last item, number 5A.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Was there a second?
A second.
Sam?
We vote aye.
All right, Salem votes aye.
Okay. Excellent. Very good.
Good talking
Thanks,
with you
everybody.
guys.